This is the Air Force Indo-Pacific Wargame. The purpose of this game is to simulate an air battle over the Indo-Pacific between the US and China, and the mission of the game is simply to get as many kills as possible. Shooting down one enemy asset equals 1 kill. So to begin the game, you and your team need to choose what planes and assets that you're going to use to try and win the battle. You get to choose 4 squadron cards and 6 enabler cards. A squadron card is a single group of like airplanes. For example, the US has a squadron card for F-16s, so that single squadron card includes 4 F-16 planes, and likewise for China. Each side has a number of different squadrons, such as fighters, bombers, AEW planes like the US's AWACS, recon drones, attack drones. They all do different things, serve different purposes, but the catch is that you have more squadrons to choose from than you're able to actually choose for the game. So you want to choose the best mix of assets to give you the best strategic advantage to get as many kills as possible. So to begin, you need to decide on what 4 squadron cards you're going to choose and what 6 enabler cards you're going to choose. There's a wide range of different enabler cards that the US and China both have. For example, there are certain enabler cards, such as this China PLA card, that allows you to strike an enemy base, like a Special Operations Force strike. Or this US enabler card that allows you to create a guided missile cruiser, which kind of works the same way as a plane on the board, but it's a ground unit and it's able to shoot down other assets. Once you have chosen your 4 squadron cards and your 6 enabler cards, you're going to take your 4 squadron cards along with the assets that go with them, and you're going to place them onto the airbase on the board, and you're going to set your enabler cards to the side. The airbase essentially functions as your airplanes are on the runway, they're ready to take off, ready to go, and the game is ready to begin. Each turn must be played as follows. First, you choose whether or not you want to play an enabler card. You have 6 enabler cards to use, each of which are single use, so if you still have any left over, you can choose to play it, or you can choose to skip it and use it in a later turn. But if you do play an enabler card, it must be played at the beginning of your turn before you do anything else. The next step is to deploy any squadrons. This mainly occurs at the beginning of the game because all squadrons start off on the airbase ready to take off. After you've chosen whether or not to play or skip any enabler cards, you choose to deploy 1 squadron at a time, and you can only deploy 1 squadron in a single turn. Once you have played any enabler cards, deployed any squadrons, you may now move, acquire, and shoot. So that means that in any order, you can choose to move any of your planes, acquire enemy planes, or attempt to shoot them down. The mission of the game is attrition, meaning you want to get as many kills as possible by shooting down the enemy's aircraft or assets. Before you can shoot down an enemy plane, you must first move one of your planes in range of that enemy and successfully acquire them before you're able to attempt to shoot them down. Each turn, you have a pool of 4 moves available to use. This means that you can split your moves between different aircraft. So you can move 2 planes forward 2 bands, or you can move 4 planes forward 1 band. You do not have to use all 4 moves in your turn if you choose. Once one of your planes is within acquisition range of an enemy, you will attempt to acquire them. Acquiring represents finding an enemy on your radar and locking onto them so that your guided missiles can find them. You have 2 acquisition attempts per round, but a single aircraft can only attempt to acquire once per round, with the exception of any AEW planes, such as the AWACS. On the back of an asset card, you will see roll to acquire with a single number, which represents the number that must be rolled to successfully acquire it. Non-stealth aircraft, such as the F-16 or the J-10, have an acquisition number of 2, meaning you must roll a 2 or higher on the 4-sided die in order to acquire it. Stealth aircraft, such as the F-22 or China's J-20B, have a 4 on the back of their card, meaning you must roll a 4 in order to acquire it, thus making the plane stealthier. If you roll less than the acquisition number, you have failed to get the plane on your radar and nothing happens. If you successfully acquire an enemy aircraft, that card will flip over to reveal what kind of plane it is, and that plane is now vulnerable to be shot at. Some planes have an acquisition advantage, such as the American AWACS in the AEW squadron, meaning it is easier for these planes to acquire enemy planes. Once this AWACS is in acquisition range of an enemy, which is 3 bands, it will attempt to acquire with a +2 advantage on the roll. This means that whatever you roll with the 4-sided die gets 2 added to it to reach the acquisition number on the back of the enemy plane. For example, because non-stealth planes have an acquisition number of 2 and the AWACS has a +2 roll advantage, the AWACS can automatically acquire any non-stealth planes. Because stealth planes have an acquisition number of 4, the AWACS only needs to roll a 2 or higher to acquire it. Along with having an acquisition bonus, AEW planes are the only aircraft that are able to attempt to acquire twice in a single turn. All other planes can only attempt to acquire once per turn.
Next, let's cover shooting down enemy aircraft. Once an enemy aircraft has been acquired and is turned over on the board, any aircraft that has an ordnance left can attempt to fire at it. Just like acquisition attempts, you have 2 shooting attempts per round, and a single aircraft can only attempt to shoot at an enemy once per round. The attack die number on the front of your asset card represents the number that you must roll in order to successfully shoot down an enemy aircraft. If your asset's attack die number is 2, this means you must roll a 2 or higher to successfully shoot down the aircraft. If you shoot it down, then you take that asset card and keep it on your side to be counted at the end of the game when counting points. If you roll less than your attack die number, then your missile misses its target and nothing happens. Each aircraft has limited ordnance. Some assets, such as China's J-16, have both air-to-air and air-to-ground ordnance. These are indicated by the missile and/or bomb symbols on the front of the asset card. Non-stealth fighter jets have 2 of each type of ordnance listed on their card. For example, the F-16 is non-stealth and has both air-to-air and air-to-ground listed on its card, meaning it can shoot at an enemy aircraft and an enemy ground unit 2 times in total, not per round. If an asset has expended some but not all of its ordnance in a single turn, it remains on the board. Once an asset is Winchester, which means that it has completely run out of ordnance, it remains on the board for your opponent's next turn, and then, if it is not shot down by the time it gets back to your turn again, that asset immediately returns to your airbase, where it cannot be used again but is vulnerable to enemy air-to-ground attacks. Winchester rules apply the same for stealth fighter jets, except stealth assets have only 1 of each kind of ordnance listed on their asset card. If a non-stealth asset has an air-to-air missile in its ordnance, it has 2 air-to-air missiles before it is Winchester. But if a stealth asset has an air-to-air missile in its ordnance, it only has 1 to shoot before it is Winchester. As a reminder, even though some assets have multiple missiles, they can only shoot 1 time per turn. Pay close attention to the information on each different asset card, as different assets have different attack capabilities and play a different strategic role in the battle. Now that you've learned how to set up the board, the phases of the game, and how to move, acquire, and shoot, you're ready to play the Air Force Indo-Pacific Wargame.